Beijing Olympics. A report from China as the Winter Games are underway amid controversy and concern. Impact of inflation. Lawmakers react to some of the worst consumer price numbers in decades. Curb appeal. A group of religious sisters decides to fight abortion by living near a Planned Parenthood clinic. And Our Lady of Lourdes, celebrating a feast day of healing with an angel's eye view of a beloved shrine. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 11th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. I'm Tracy Sabol. The first week of the Winter Olympics are wrapping up in Beijing. The Games have presented a variety of challenges, including containing the spread of COVID-19 and addressing security concerns for athletes and reporters. Plus, China has faced backlash over its repeated human rights abuses. That said, the Games continue. And joining me now from Beijing is Philip Crowther, Associated Press International Affiliate reporter. Philip, great to see you. I know you recently arrived in Beijing. Can you set the scene for us? What's the atmosphere there like?
Yeah, look, I mean, it looks like I'm in the middle of the street outside of the Bird's Nest, the big national stadium you can see right behind me. But really, I am in something called the closed loop. It's a bubble relatively similar to what we experienced in the summer in Tokyo. What that means is that we, the athletes and officials, have absolutely no contact with the local population. Strict COVID-19 guidelines here in China. So it's frustrating, of course, but it's the way that China was able to organize these Winter Olympic Games, because those COVID rules, in theory, would have led to pretty much everybody having to go into quarantine for a whole 3 weeks. So I couldn't actually tell you what these Olympic Games feel like from within Beijing. I don't know from personal perspective what people make of these Olympic Games. Of course, this is a lot like Tokyo. There aren't a lot of spectators in these arenas. There are a few that are allowed inside, but no foreigners allowed inside of China for these Olympic Games. And let me just give you one example of how few foreigners can get into China right now. I came over on a plane with 14 passengers on board. It's quite extraordinary. And one thing I saw from the window, by the way, one of the ski areas. You might have seen these aerial pictures before. It's arid out there, about 80 kilometers from where I am right now. It's all artificial snow that's being used for the skiing events. There is no natural snow so far for these Winter Olympics. That is quite extraordinary.
You know, one thing I want to bring up back again, Philip, you had mentioned COVID-19. What exactly is the situation when it comes to infections in athletes? What more do you know about that and what's being done about it?
Well, look, there have been very few positive cases. Essentially, this closed-loop system, after 1 week of these Winter Olympics here in China, it's working. There have been no major outbreaks. There's been nothing, very much like what happened in Tokyo during the Summer Games. Organizers here are very happy with how things are going, because what they want to keep from happening is, first of all, an outbreak among athletes, for example, but also any outbreak then reaching the population of Beijing. That is why we're being kept completely separate from each other. Athletes have got used to it. You have to do daily COVID-19 tests. You have to wear a mask at all times. We're used to it. The athletes are used to it. And that's how things are going here, essentially. These strict COVID-19 rules that were already in place here in China, we're getting to experience them a little bit here now.
And Philip, I know before you got to Beijing, you were in Ukraine, and I understand a Ukrainian athlete displayed a sign that said "No war in Ukraine" to the cameras. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was an athlete who was participating in the skeleton in one of the ski areas here outside of Beijing. Just a small sign that he had. All it said was "No war in Ukraine." But I believe it is the very first use of this stage by an athlete to make what you could consider a political point. It's not really asking for no war in one's home country, and indeed the International Olympic Committee and the organizers here have seen it that way. He will not be punished. In theory, you're not allowed to use political speech during Olympic Games, but this was seen as a general message against war that was not inappropriate. Now, what this does, of course, and this tends to happen at big sporting events, it's a possibility for athletes, if they want, to bring those problems from their home countries to a bigger stage. He managed to do that. And how timely it was, of course, with what is happening right now in Ukraine and with those warnings coming from the Biden administration right now that a military offensive by Russia into Ukraine could be imminent.
Yes, and we are following that very closely. Another thing I want to touch on also with an athlete, I understand there was a Russian figure skater who tested positive for a drug while competing. Let's talk a little bit more about that and what you know.
Yeah, this is Kamila Valieva. She's an extraordinary athlete, 15 years old. She is the favorite to win in the women's figure skating. That's next week. But she also won with the women's team here, and that was at the beginning of this week. She had tested positive in December in St. Petersburg, but that result was only revealed one day after she won gold with her team here, after an extraordinary performance by her. And this was revealed just before the medal ceremony, by the way, so that had to be postponed. Now we don't know whether she will be allowed to compete any further in these Olympic Games. The Russian anti-doping agency had first suspended her, now want her to continue competing. The International Olympic Committee don't want her competing because there was a positive doping case. So this is going all the way to the highest court of arbitration for sport, and that's where a decision will be made, whether we will see her again on the ice in the next few days. Of course, remember that Russia has a pretty long history of doping scandals during Olympic Games. In fact, the Russian team on paper doesn't exist here. It's the Russian Olympic Committee that is represented here. The Russian flag and the Russian national anthem are not used at Olympic Games.
Well, Philip, so much more we can talk about. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but thank you so much. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
And coming up later in the newscast, a look at which countries are atop the standings for most medals at the Beijing Games. President Joe Biden joined several world leaders, key allies and partners on a secure video call today. And according to the White House, the leaders agreed to impose massive consequences and severe economic costs on Russia should it invade Ukraine. This comes as the president and top officials warn any Americans still in Ukraine, get out now. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, President Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, told reporters in the briefing room today they continue to see signs of Russian escalation and that an invasion could happen any day now, even during the Olympics, but emphasized that doesn't guarantee that Russia is going to just march in.
The growing Russian military threat against Ukraine prompts a high-stakes call among world leaders. France, Britain, and Poland among the countries joining the U.S. in a strategy session.
If a Russian attack on Ukraine proceeds, it is likely to begin with aerial bombing and missile attacks that could obviously kill civilians without regard to their nationality.
And across the globe, during a trip to Australia, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warns
we're in a window when an invasion could begin at any time. That includes during the Olympics.
Pope Francis tweeting just the other day, let us continue to implore the God of peace that tensions and threats of war be overcome through serious dialogue. Let's not forget, war is madness. And new today, President Joe Biden signs an executive order to fund humanitarian relief in Afghanistan. That nation's healthcare system, which survived on international donor funding, has collapsed. The president wants to take $7 billion in Afghan assets frozen in U.S. bank accounts and split that among Afghans, as well as victims of the 9/11 attacks, to fund ongoing litigation.
President Biden also says he's making progress in his search to fill a seat here at the U.S. Supreme Court. The president told NBC he's done a deep dive on about 4 potential picks to see if their background checks would reveal anything that would disqualify them.
The president met last night with Democrats from the Senate Judiciary Committee, tweeting, "There are a wealth of extraordinarily qualified potential nominees under consideration, all of whom are deserving of bipartisan support."
His decision to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court is literally going to change the face of the court for the future and for our history in the United States.
For now, the High Court remains in favor of conservatives 6-3, and whoever the new nominee ends up being, President Biden's pick will not change that number, and it's widely expected because of the president's position on abortion, the next justice, whoever that is, will not stand with pro-life advocates. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Consumer prices in the U.S. have posted their largest jump in 40 years. And on Capitol Hill, lawmakers like Democrat Joe Manchin are turning their attention to how to tackle inflation.
This inflation is real. It's harming people. It's 7.5%. That's a tax. And it continues to increase. It's not decreasing. So the feds have to step up to the plate and do something. The administration has to do. We all have to work together right now to get our financial house in order. If not, it's going to be absolutely horrible what it's going to do to the American economy.
Senate Republicans say the rising inflation is due to the Democrats' reckless spending.
Majority Leader.
The severity of this inflation was directly fueled by the reckless far-left spending spree that every single Democrat in this chamber voted to ram through at President Biden's behest last year.
To help stem inflation, reports say the Federal Reserve could raise interest rates by as much as a full percentage point by July 1st. Today marks the 43rd anniversary of Iran's Islamic Revolution. In Tehran, American flags were burned and trampled. Protesters on motorbikes converged at the Yazidi Tower, the symbol of Iran's history. It was constructed by the toppled Shah, whose government fell on this date back in 1979. The Ayatollah Khomeini would return from exile to become Iran's supreme leader. Coming up, learn more about an initiative to help the sick founded by St. John Paul II.
Qua propter bene consus pontes huius actus plena libertate declaro.
9 years ago today, Pope Benedict XVI became the first pope in nearly 600 years to resign. The resignation took effect just over 2 weeks later. The Pope Emeritus turns 95 in April. And as we reported, Benedict released a letter this week in response to a report which faulted his handling of abuse cases during his tenure as Munich Archbishop. The Pope Emeritus' personal secretary spoke today with EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser about that report and also how the Pope is doing. Stay tuned to EWTN on Monday for more of the conversation. Pope Francis reminds medical professionals to emphasize both physical and spiritual healing.
In occasione della 30ª giornata mondiale del malato.
In a video message for the 30th annual World Day of the Sick, the Holy Father called for effective medical care for everyone. The address was part of an online seminar organized by the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Joining us now from Rome is Monsignor Charles Namugera from the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Monsignor, thank you so much for your time today. Can you tell us more about this event, how many people are participating, and also what you hope comes from it?
Well, today we celebrated the World Day of the Sick, and this is the 30th anniversary of the World Day of the Sick, which is celebrated each year on the liturgical memorial of Our Lady of Lourdes. And the Church, taking from the example and command of Christ, it has always felt that taking care of the sick is an integral or an essential part of her mission. And so the World Day of the Sick comes to remind people, the people of God, the church healthcare institutions, and the civil society at large, to the need to offer the best possible care for our sick brothers and sisters. The Christians are reminded that they are disciples of Christ, and so they are called to walk into the footsteps of Christ. And the civil society is being reminded that health care or access to health services is an essential fundamental human right, which needs to be safeguarded and promoted. So the church chose Our Lady of Lourdes Memorial because Our Lady of Lourdes Sanctuary is one of those most dear sanctuaries to the Christians. It is both a place and symbol of hope and grace. And then Our Lady, who stood by the cross of Christ, is an invitation to Christians to stand by the crosses of those who are crucified today. And standing by the cross of those who are crucified today means being ready to reach out to the sick people, provide care and consolation to them.
And also, Monsignor, I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit more about what the Holy Father said in his video message?
Yes, the Holy Father in his video message thanked the healthcare workers for the work they are doing beside the sick people. And he reminded them that their mission, through them, the mercy of God reaches out to other people. And since the message for this year was that be merciful as your Heavenly Father is merciful, walk by those who are suffering in a path of charity. What the healthcare workers are doing, what the volunteer people are doing in their mission every day is to make the mercy of God, the mercy of Christ, reach out to those who are most in need through their daily activity. And so their work supersedes or outgoes the profession they are doing, and it becomes a mission. It is a calling that they are living out to show God's mercy to the people of God, those who are most in need. And in their daily work, he called them or reminded them, or each one of us, that we have to put the sick person at the center of the work we are doing.
Well, Monsignor, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about all of this. We really appreciate it. Monsignor Charles Namogera from the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development at the Vatican. Thank you again, and God bless you.
You're welcome.
Up next, how a community of religious sisters serves on the front lines in the fight to defend life. A federal court is temporarily allowing abortion referrals to continue by so-called family planning clinics. It rejects arguments in a pending 12-state lawsuit that seeks to restore Trump administration rules which had kept $60 million taxpayer dollars away from Planned Parenthood. Well, it may seem like an unusual place for a convent, but that is by design. Our Lady of Guadalupe Convent is located right across the street from a Planned Parenthood clinic in St. Louis, Missouri. The convent has a mission of prayer and hospitality. Sister Sue Ann Hall and Sister Dolores Vogt run the convent and spend their days welcoming those who are seeking fellowship and want to pray for the end of abortions. We recently caught up with one of the sisters. And joining me now is Sister Sue Ann Hall with the Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity. Sister, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. Can you talk to us more about your convent and the reason for its location?
Our convent is right across the street from Planned Parenthood. It's the only Planned Parenthood that's in St. Louis. We're here to be a support and for hospitality and for prayer. We're open every day. And people can come to pray in our chapel. They can come use our facilities or whatever. We're happy to welcome people to come, especially if the weather is bad or something, and it's nice to have a place to go where you can still pray and be of service to the people that are there.
Yeah, you mentioned some of it, but can you talk to us a little bit more about the day-to-day life there for you all?
I guess what the best thing I can say is the doorbell kind of dictates what we do. When the doorbell rings, we go and answer it and take care of, who's ever there. Our time of prayer is there in our daily life. Sometimes we have Mass scheduled at our place with one of the parishes in the St. Louis area. And we invite them to come and pray with us, to have an hour of adoration before Mass. And then we serve a luncheon after the Mass is over. And it also works to have people come and share with us their feelings on abortion and their desire to serve people. And I think our daily life is mostly prayer. We're trying to make people more aware of the need for prayer. And it's like Archbishop Carlson said, it's through prayer that this is going to end.
Absolutely. And I understand, you mentioned the doorbell. I understand that you were answering that a lot. A lot of people visited you on the day of the Dobbs oral arguments. Can you talk to us maybe a little bit more about that?
We had adoration in our chapel. We had a group that was outside of Planned Parenthood. We went over to say a rosary together and pray. It strikes me that people are so willing, in many respects, to end this abortion issue and really pray, and they really come out and do a service.
Absolutely. And Sister, I want to ask you, how has the location of the convent, how has that really made a difference in bringing down the number of abortions performed at that Planned Parenthood, enabled you to save more lives as well?
Well, like I said, it's located right across the street from Planned Parenthood. One of their parking lots is right next to our house. When we first came, that parking lot was completely full of cars of employees. It is now empty. There are very few times that there's anybody parking in that parking lot. There are a group of young people who do counseling outside of Planned Parenthood that try to convince the person not to have the abortion. And sometimes they have the turnarounds that they would like. But most of the time, it's really just the prayer. It brings a lot of peace and calm to our lives. It brings a lot of hope in trying to serve people. And it's just a stone's throw away. It's so close that it would work wonders for others to have this.
Absolutely. And you're certainly inspiring others as well. Sister Sue-Ann, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all that you're doing. We really appreciate it, and God bless you.
God bless you too.
On a different note, at the Olympics, the U.S. has dropped out of the top 5 in the medal count. Germany is leading with the most gold medals with 7. Norway, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Austria round out the top 5. The U.S. has dropped to 6 right now with 4 golds, 5 silvers, and 1 bronze. Finally tonight, as we mentioned earlier, today is the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. And when the beloved Catholic shrine was closed to visitors back in 2020 because of the coronavirus, one photographer floated an idea to officials. The 31-year-old took drone footage of the shrine in southwestern France. He then made it available over the internet. He said that he wanted to be sure that people who were sick could still see the site that had been credited with tens of thousands of healings. His efforts have been noticed. In the first year alone, the virtual pilgrimage was viewed 53,000 times from more than 150 countries. Incredible. And for more on this story, including background on how that project began and how to view the 360-degree film, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.